12 or 10:02. All right, we're live. Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to our weekly legislative update. For those of you watching on Facebook or attending the meeting, welcome. I want to recognize a couple of board members from the state board. We got Chairman of Trustees Brian Banner, and as always, we got Marco Monteblanco, our president, and then Michael, myself, Charles Portia from Lakewood, Jeff Anaya from Lodge 12, and we have attending again, we have Sister Triplet from Lodge 27. So today we have a pretty aggressive agenda we got to go through. So I'm not going to spend much more time and turn the floor over to Michael, and let's get at it.
Right on. Well, thank you so much, James, and good morning, everybody. And I'll just let you know when I got the agenda this morning, I emailed James back and said, "Holy agenda, Batman!" He just had there's a lot on here, and a lot of the stuff we've talked about on previous Saturdays, and some of those bills haven't moved. So I'm hopeful that we can click through this pretty quickly in an hour, and I'm hopeful to get through everything. So high level. We are now past the halfway point of the 2021 legislative session. Today is the 55th legislative day. Both the House and the Senate are working today, and both actually go on the floor here right now at 10 a.m. They usually spend a little bit of time getting members all hooked up on their Zooms and stuff, but they are definitely going to be working today all day. I think Senate tends to be a little bit more cautious in their dinner breaks and going late. So I expect the House to go late and the Senate to go reasonably late. I fully also expect at least the House to work tomorrow for a little bit. It's every day is a legislative day. So I expect them to work. And remember when we talked last week, both the House and the Senate are doing floor action right now. There is what we call the original or House of Origin cutoff coming this Tuesday at 5 p.m. And what that means is every Senate bill that isn't necessary to implement the budget, my big caveat as always, every Senate bill that isn't NTIB, all policy bills and budget bills must be passed over to the House. Likewise, any House policy bills or other bills that are not necessary to implement the budget have to be passed over to the Senate. So both bodies are working really diligently up until the Tuesday 5 p.m. deadline to get all of their policy bills and their non-NTIB bills out. When I say that, the 5 o'clock, I'll just let you all know one of the big deals on these cutoff days for purposes of floor action is which bill is going to be the 5 o'clock bill, meaning which bill are the majority parties holding for the last bill that they know is contentious and they know has a lot of amendments and they know is going to take a lot of time. So the bodies reserve their right for the bill, usually at about 4:58, finish their last bill on the agenda. And then if you are the 5 o'clock bill, sometimes it can go over 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on the bill and the number of amendments. So we all work, excuse me, towards that deadline at Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So we'll be in for some long days for sure, all the way up until then. And then after next Tuesday, we go back to the public hearing side of the process where the Senate starts hearing House bills and the House starts hearing Senate bills. And I'll go through that a little bit here this morning as we talk about the bills that are moving and when they're scheduled, if they are. So the first one I'm going to start with is House Bill 1054. And as you all know, that's the Peace Officer Tactics Bill. That bill passed out of the House this past week. Largely on a party line vote, 54 to 43. We had one Republican vote for it and 3 Democrats not vote for it. And I'll explain the 3 Democrats voting no is, remember, the House Democrats have a pretty decent majority. They've got several members who are in more moderate districts and not leaning too far to the left. And so a lot of times you will see on tax votes and controversial votes, you may see some House Democrats on the more moderate side voting no. And I kind of call that a little, sometimes just kind of letting them off a little bit, but it's good for their districts, and their leadership knows and understands the politics of their districts, and know that voting for some bills that tend a little bit farther left than their districts are is a good thing. So that bill is going to be heard in the Senate Law and Justice Committee next week on the 11th, which is Thursday. There were several amendments that were proposed on the House floor. Several of them were taken and the bill has been made, at least from our standpoint, much better. We're pro and supportive of the bill as it passed. We understand that there are a couple of items in there that folks still have consternation on, but I think on balance, and James and Marco, correct me if I'm wrong, I think on balance, we're done talking about negotiating that bill, and we're just going to kind of move forward and focus on some other bills that are also moving through the process that are in worse shape than 1054, the tactics bill. So James, Marco, miss anything on 1054?
Hey, go ahead, Marco. You go first.
No, I think you hit that right on the head, Michael. There's it's to a place now that we can divert our focus to some other bills that are out there that need some attention for sure.
Yeah, and I'm just going to echo what Michael and Marco just said, and that is, I'm going to add one thing, and I've had a lot of calls, and Marco and I have spoken to individual bargaining units about this bill as well. At some point, we got all we could get from that bill. Do we wish that bill had never been run? Absolutely, we wish that bill had never been run. But at some point, you can only get as far as you can go, and I think we came a long way with that bill. Yes, we lost LVNR, and yes, we lost no-knock warrants, but we saved a lot of other stuff. And so what I would ask everyone is to take a look at what's working its way through Congress nationally and through the Department of Justice, where they're going to require that you adopt the national consensus policy on use of force if you want to receive federal funds, which, if you read that, moves LVNR to the level of deadly force. So I agree totally, and it's time to start focusing on some bigger, more aggressive bills so that we can work with all our partners to try to get those mitigated and get the safest working environment for our members.
Great, thanks. And we have, as I recall, we have a 1054 statement up on our Facebook page that folks can go look at. Is that right still? Okay.
That's correct.
And I think that statement does a really good job of kind of summarizing on one page what James just said, and we'll go from there.
So hold on just real quick, Michael. You can get us. We have a thing from Facebook on the pursuit section in regards to the pursuit portion of 1054. Are officers looking at getting charged if a pursuit is later found to be unreasonable and not follow the law? What's your take on that, Michael? And then we can go from there.
Boy, that's a real specific question. I have to go back and I need to go back and look at the language and see. And what I would say is have that person, if we can, have that person get to me offline, and I can pull the language, directly out in front of me, put the language in front of me and do that analysis. But what we did, in the ultimate bill is to not allow for the CJTC to do model policies on pursuits. And so, this section talks about probable cause to believe that a person has committed a violent offense. So I think based upon what I just heard, it would be, kind of fact specific. And there's some caveats in there about, continuing pursuits and everything. But what I'd like to do is have that person get a hold of me after we're done here, and I'd be happy to have that conversation.
Thanks, Michael. And for Robbie, Jeremy, if you want, you can you can message me personally and we can make that connection, or you can just email me and we can make that connection as well. But I agree with Michael. I think it's going to be fact specific, and the preliminary conversations we had with our staff attorneys about that section was it pretty much in line with about 70% of the policies they see in Washington already, which require a serious offense to pursue. So we thought it was in a good place based on that recommendation and some other things. But again, we will look into it. We will address our members' concerns.
Yeah, and I think there might be a little bit of a tie, and I heard the word liability in there, and if there's a tie back to House Bill 1202, we need to have that discussion as well. Happy to do that though, for sure. Okay. Next bill, Senate Bill 5051. This is the CERT, DCERT, or Police Accountability Bill. This bill was the bill that had 40 amendments on the Senate floor, passed out of the Senate party line, and it is scheduled for public hearing next week in the House Public Safety Committee. We will testify that we continue to have concerns with this legislation, and we've got some amendments prepared that we'll offer up to the committee. And my hope is that Senate Bill 5051 receives a lot of the real good attention that the chair, the vice chair, and the ranking member had on some of the House bills, that it really gets worked on the House side. It's a Senate bill, and Senator Peterson is going to be pretty protective of his bill. But, the directions that James and I got from him as the prime sponsor as it moved off the Senate floor is that that's the way it was going to move and to go work it in the Senate. So we're hopeful to have our concerns vetted really well and have some good conversations with the House leadership on police reform and see if we can get some decent changes made to 5051. But right now, with the way it's constructed and the authority and the breadth of authority that it gives the CJTC in terms of CERT, DCERT, and getting a second bite of the apple, even before an investigation at the local level hasn't been completed, is concerning to us. So we got to work really hard to get that piece of legislation moved into the right direction. So more to come on that. Miss anything, James or Marco?
Nope.
All right. House Bill 1202, civil cause of action against peace officers, civil liability. This is on the House floor calendar right now. Recall, this is the bill that had the I-90 1064 reasonable officer standard in it as it was introduced, and as it moved out of committee, that provision in that section, we call it just the section 6, was removed out of the bill. Recall, from our perspective, this bill, unlike a lot of other civil liabilities bills around the country, provides peace officers with really good defenses and backstops if they're following policy, training, or at the direction or following the direction of their supervisor. And also in situations like that, it also holds the local law enforcement agency liable as well. I can tell you that right now this is a really big fight going on in the legislature. As you can well imagine, local governments do not like aren't in a position to like being exposed to this liability. I understand that. or we understand that, but at the same time, if they're, following their training requirements and they're doing the right training and doing things that they're supposed to, they shouldn't be concerned about the liability. So, but no, that is a really hard fight with the local governments pushing really hard to not have that bill or not have their liability in that bill continue on. There are 16 amendments on this bill right now on the floor. 2 of them are proposed by Representative Tai, and 14 of them are proposed by the Republicans. One of Representative Tai's amendment is ones that was suggested by us. And remember, this bill allows the Attorney General's office the ability, if they have a reasonable cause, to get into the knickers of a local law enforcement agency if they find that there's a pattern or practice of unlawful and inappropriate behavior. That section used to allow the Attorney General, well, right now that section allows the Attorney General to both go after the law enforcement agency and the peace officer. What we argued is that it wasn't appropriate for the Attorney General to go individually after peace officers, but that it was more appropriate to go and audit or get into the knickers of the local agency, because they're the ones who are doing the training and such. So, and then if there is an outflowing from that investigation of the agency that needs to be taken care of at a peace officer level, the agency would be in charge of doing that. So it gets peace officers out of the realm of the Attorney General's investigation. So because that bill is a little bit more controversial, it's not in a position, I think, to run at least this weekend. So I understand when I get down to House Bill 1310, we understand that that bill is going to be run sometime today, and I'll talk about that here in just a minute. So we'll continue to watch 1202. We have had really great conversations with the prime sponsor, Representative Tai. And very much appreciate her listening to us months ago when we had Rob Pride on from Colorado, and she really took some of our suggestions to heart. So we think that bill is in a pretty decent place right now, and we'll watch the amendments. Anything on that, James, Marco?
Yeah, I just want to point out that early on, we took a position that we would rather work with the prime sponsor than to just out and outright oppose this bill and get it to a place where during our preliminary conversation, she said that she wanted to go, and that was put the focus on the agency and the hiring government body. And so if that is the case, then we want to work with her to get it to that place. The other thing I'll note is some of our law enforcement partners have now kind of aligned with our position and wanting to work with the prime sponsor. We're going to continue to work on this bill. The Supreme Court ruling kind of drew pause, because here's a perfect example of where this could go awry. We've had communication, like Michael said, with Representative Tai since the Supreme Court ruling about simple possession came out, which we'll talk about later. Other than that, we feel we're in a good place to continue to work on this bill, and we'll keep you updated.
Yeah, and I was reminded in that bill, there is a section in there that states that it is only applicable prospectively to actions that are filed after the effective date of that bill. So from just a prospective only position, at least we are believe that Supreme Court decisions like Blake will only apply prospectively for officers, not retrospectively. So I'm going to spend just a second talking about 54, 53. And that's the bill we spent a little bit of time talking about last week. That's Senator Schessler's left 1, left 2, TERS 1 combination, extra benefits, and a benefit to left 2 members. As I mentioned last week, that bill is going to be on hold until such time as the revenue forecast comes forward, and we'll keep you updated week to week as we go through next week, the following week, and the following week, and budgets start getting put together. My expectation is that if the revenue forecast, comes in above what it was at the last forecast, and revenues continue to trickle up a little bit for the state, that this will be a piece of legislation that won't be ran this year. If I'm wrong and the revenue forecast goes down, just goes down, then the state will be in a place looking for some more revenue. And remember, this bill, because it consolidates LEF 1 and TERS 1, it relieves the state of the payment obligations on the TERS 1 side, so it saves them a little bit of money, but we'll keep you posted on that. House Bill 1310, the use of force bill, that's on the floor calendar. As I mentioned just a second ago, it's my understanding, or our understanding, that bill is going to run today. When exactly, I don't know. For those of you who are legislative junkies, you can pop on the television, Washington or tvw.org website. There's a schedule there. And when you click on the schedule, you'll see live events. And today you will see the House and the Senate there noted. It's kind of hit and miss. I usually get a little bit of advance notice on when those bills are supposed to run. But if you want to keep on clicking in and out of TVW, you might be able to watch the debate on that bill today. There are 9 amendments that are moving forward, that are on the bar, as we say, on House Bill 1310. And we'll see how those amendments go. I'm not of the belief that a lot of them will be adopted, but we'll see how we go on those amendments today. Miss anything on 1310, James, Marco?
I want to recognize there's been a lot of work behind the scenes on both sides of the aisle. Representative Mossbrucker and Representative Johnson, the prime sponsor, that both have been working behind the scenes to protect our interests. And I want to recognize that there is some bipartisan work going on to try to mitigate some of this stuff. Representative Johnson has been very open to discussion about this bill, and Michael and I have had a couple meetings with him, and I just want to recognize that, hey, there is some communication, some work going on, not just people in their corners voting down party lines on some of this stuff. Even though a majority of the Republicans may vote against something, there is people on the Republican side working with people on the Democratic side to try to find some good common ground and some good policy.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple of things. Out of the 9 amendments, I expect one of them to be adopted by Representative Clippert. And I mentioned earlier Section 6 on 1202, and that was an incorrect reference. The Section 6 removal was in this bill, House Bill 1310. There's an amendment that'll be accepted by Representative Clippert that widens a little bit Section 3 of that bill, which is talks about when a peace officer can use force against another person. And there's some removal of some language to effect an arrest, and some insertion of language that would read somewhere along the lines to protect against criminal conduct where there is probable cause to make an arrest. So it opens up the use of force section a little bit. I would also note that coming out of committee, as James mentioned, prime sponsor really did, I think, a pretty good job of inserting some language that the law enforcement community had put forward to make the section on use of force a little bit better in terms of inserting when possible language in several instances, and some language that inserted, in addition to when possible, some language to overcome the resistance that's coming at the peace officer. So we felt that was important as well. And then in some definitions they put in, they included some totality of the circumstances language, which is very important to us because we hate, as you all know, armchair quarterbacks looking at this stuff in retrospect. So those were some very important amendments to us. And this bill will go off today with one additional amendment that we're supportive of.
Yeah, I just want to, I'll try to put it in cop terms a little bit. It basically, if this amendment gets taken, it will align that bill with the current use of force standard that's already in the RCW, which is the use of force standard that we got set in place a couple of years ago under House Bill 1064 or the 940. So the reasonable officer standard. So the totality of the circumstances language is big, and it pretty much brings the whole bill in line with current standard.
Yep. Thank you for putting that in the peace officer terms. Always something I struggle with, as you know. Supreme Court ruling. I'm going to move on to the next one. Blake.
Hey, Michael.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Can we just circle back really quick to 1054 for a second? I had a question come into my email from a SWAT team leader, and he wanted to check in with the armored vehicles and the language on that.
So armored vehicles are allowed. Armed vehicles are not allowed. So we were able to get language in there that allowed for the use and purchase of armored vehicles, meaning vehicles that may have, steel on the outside, steel in the doors, that sort of thing. But what we're going to be prohibited from purchasing is that sort of vehicle with a machine gun on top. So, and likewise, that would apply to other types of equipment as well. So armored is going to be okay. Armed is not going to be okay.
Thank you.
Got it? Okay. All right. Blake v. State. Felony possession. You all know, I hope by now, that no more arrests can be based on possession only. This is a real struggle for the D side of the aisle in the legislature, not so much for the R side. There's been a bill introduced, co-sponsored by Representatives Mullet and Hobbs, that is right down the aisle of our suggestion, and our statement to the legislature was just to fix this, insert the word knowingly into the possession statute, and then moving forward, you've got constitutional due process that'll address the Supreme Court decision. As you can well guess, there are folks on the D side of the aisle that tend to be more in favor of decriminalization of certain drugs. And on the R side of the aisle, they tend to be a little bit more conservative in that regard and would, support inserting the word knowingly into the statute and just moving along without considering things like treatment and such. So this is a real contentious issue right now in the legislature. We've talked about House Bill 1499, which was Representative Davis's decriminalization, substance use, behavioral health treatment enhancement bill, which is still moving along and may be a vehicle where an answer to this Supreme Court decision might lie. I will tell you that while her bill left the treatment part in it as it left committee, it removed the decriminalization part and created a task force to study that piece. Question is whether or not that is something that will be sufficient for the members of the D side of the aisle, whether or not that goes farther enough and whether or not they're interested in the study. So very much more to come on that. Again, we got about 52 days left in session. So I'm certain this will be something that comes up. Notably, that bill on the Senate side was prime sponsored and co-sponsored by 2 moderate Democrats. Okay, I'm going to move on to House Bill 1203. That's the Community Oversight Board bill. We're still working on this bill. Remember, this bill has some significant concern areas in it for us and a lot of other folks in the law enforcement world and on the law enforcement agency world. It has investigative, subpoena, all sorts of powers in it that we think are just a bridge too far. We're okay with community oversight boards being engaged in policy discussions and recommendations on things. But giving community oversight boards investigatory powers and subpoena powers and powers to hire and fire police chiefs and such is just a bridge too far for us and everybody else, I think, in the law enforcement community. So we're still working to keep this bill. It's in the Rules Committee and on the House side. It has not been moved up to the second reading calendar, which makes it available to be considered by the full House. So right now we're hoping that bill, I'm going to work to keep that bill in the Rules Committee so it doesn't come up for action. Any questions on the ads on 1203, James, Marco? Okay. House Bill 1267. This is the Office of Independent Investigations Governor Request legislation. Was part of the Governor's Police Reform Task Force that James was on. It passed out of the House 57-39. So it garnered some Republican votes, about 3 or 4 as it moved off of the House floor. I think substantively, we don't have really any concerns with how the bill itself is set out. We've got a few, things we would like to see changed in it. And we continue to regrettably be opposed to that legislation, and it's soft opposition because it wasn't coupled with a statewide independent prosecutor bill or language as well. And remember, those two things came out of the Governor's Task Force. And in our judgment, for the statewide independent investigation teams to be successful, there has to be married with that a statewide independent prosecutorial piece as well. Our worry is that if the independent investigation team legislation moves forward without the independent prosecutorial piece, is that you'll end up with a lot of hiccups, I'll use the word, that are happening today with local prosecutors and law enforcement agencies. For those of you who haven't, there's an Attorney General study or report that came out earlier this week. And if we haven't, James and Marco, we should probably put a link to that study on our Facebook page /website. And I'm going to get this number wrong, but most of the agencies that were surveyed on that didn't follow the 1064 I-940 and rules in terms of independent investigations. A lot of that we know and understand was due to the CJTC's slowness in getting out the rules and a couple of opinions they rendered on how many community members were supposed to be on those independent investigation teams. So we're not quite certain how this is going to work out in the end, but I think hopefully you understand our trepidation on this bill moving forward without that independent statewide prosecutor piece. So hasn't been scheduled yet for hearing on the Senate side, and we'll see how we'll work on our testimony as it gets closer to public hearing. So James, Marco, you want to add anything on 1267?
Yeah, go ahead, Marco. Sorry.
No, I just want to echo your comments, Michael, that we can't feel the Fraternal Order Police can't go forward with this bill in support without that piece. That is such a critical piece for us because they go hand in hand. And so without that, we definitely need that to be considered.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm going to give the why. So, and this why actually comes from a couple of our FOP attorneys that said if we had one independent investigative body and one independent prosecutorial body that reviews all IIT, it would allow us to equip our members to be better prepared for the process. Yep. And so bringing consistency to the process is a good thing. The legislature did not do that by leaving out the independent prosecution piece. And so now we're going to have a consistent group investigating, but you're going to have 39 independent prosecutors that are going to do things a different way and review things a different way. And so we feel that the process is handicapped from the get-go without the independent prosecutorial review.
All right. Data collection, Senate Bill 5289. Been working behind the scenes with the attorney. Well, I always say, I hate to say always that behind the scenes. We've been working with the Attorney General's office on getting this bill in just really good shape to collect the most robust and comprehensive data elements that are out there. The bill, as it passed the Senate floor, was adopted 46-2. So we've got really good support for the data collection bill. It was referred to the Public Safety Committee in the House, hasn't been scheduled yet. We're looking at I think there are a few more tweaks around the edges in terms of making this bill almost perfect. Right now, the data will be housed in a university, private or public. There's an advisory group that's established to put together an RFP and data elements that contains 3 law enforcement folks, 3 community folks, and a couple of others. But we feel that is in really good shape. Our biggest challenge on that bill is going to be getting it properly funded. So we're going to have to work really hard with the Ways and Means folks, and and I would say our community group partners, that those relationships that James and Marco worked so hard to establish. We need to get them on board so that they're with us advocating for this to be funded and funded in an appropriate amount. And let's not skimp on pennies on this, particularly in the front end, where there's going to be a lot of historical data to be put into the system. We feel that's very important, so you can start doing some analytics straight away after the first year, rather than having to have the data catch up. Because if you don't do a goodly amount of historical data, is all you're relying upon is your prospective data that you're going to collect. And so you won't be able to do any conclusions or make any recommendations on peace officer uses of force and things until like year 3. So it's going to cost a little bit more in the front end. We're going to continue to push to have that funded to the fullest extent possible. Knowing full well that, for example, House Bill 1267, the Office of Independent Investigations, at least in the governor's budget, had about a $26 million price tag on it. So we're just got to make certain that all this stuff gets funded and the data collection does not get left off the table. Any data collection, Marco, James, anything to add?
I think I like where we're going with this. I
Yeah.
like where we're going with it, and and the hard work, Michael, that you're putting into to as well, and working with the Attorney General's office. It needs to be commended. We're grateful that you've been able to work so hard on that bill.
And if you ever wanted to see a need for why we need good data collection, please, everyone, take a look at the Tacoma News Tribune yesterday. How that there was data collected just based off census, and it painted a very negative picture. Had we had this data collection system in place, we would all law enforcement would have ammunition to refute data so one-sided, and the way it was collected, we would be able to push back and show that that's just a narrative. So that Tacoma News Tribune article yesterday about data collection and how they did their data collection is a perfect example why we need this system.
Okay. I'm going to lump House Bill 1001 and 1000 in together. 1011 is moving forward. That's the grant dollars for agencies to increase and make better their equity and inclusion hiring. And then House Bill 1000 is a peace officer wellness bill that we're going to probably won't come about until the budgets start getting narrowed down. So we're going to, once we get here in a couple of weeks, we'll start pushing the budget writers and our supporters in the House and the Senate to get some peace officer wellness funded. Remember that bill last session was vetoed by the governor to save for COVID money. So we're going to continue to push that bill as well. Those are bills sponsored by Reps Maycumber and Lovick. House Bill 1088, Brady bill or impeachment bill. It passed the Senate Law and Justice Committee last Thursday. And the striking amendment changed it into be in a way that I'm not quite certain how much our support is going to continue on that. We have concerns because while we continue to ask for statewide recommendations on Brady impeachment, the striking amendment by Senator Dingra delegated that authority down to the 39 prosecutors. And so we're back to where we're going to have 39 different, potentially 39 different interpretations of some model policies that get put forward. So we're going to continue to work as hard as we can with the prime sponsor to get back to where we were in terms of trying to get some statewide standards put forward on Brady so that all 39 prosecutors are looking at it from the same or through the same lens at a high level, knowing that 39 interpretations on Brady just doesn't work for peace officers. And we're just going to kind of continue to work on that. I believe James, we have a meeting with Senator Dingra next week. Anything?
Hey, so I want to go back to data collection. I was typing a long message for somebody in the chat. So just to break down data collection, the data collection bill, as we've discussed in other meetings previously, is going to be housed at the Washington State University.
Nope.
The only group so far that has really put up some opposition to data collection has been WASPIC. And my assessment of that, and again, I'll go out on a limb, is that they want to house the data themselves. They've ran a couple of attempted to run a bill to where they were the keepers of the data. But I want to be very clear. This data is going to be housed outside of law enforcement at a university with a consortium of both public and private universities and an advisory group of stakeholders. So instead of typing that in the chat, I would just address it.
Yeah, and I would kind of clarify that, James. I would say that I think a lot of the concerns from WASPIC aren't necessarily associated with them housing the data. I think and hope that we've gotten by that, but I think a lot of it is the fiscal impacts on local government and their collection of the data. And we're working really hard in the bill to minimize that impact on local governments. We're trying to restrict it to incident reports, and then they get decoded, and those incident reports get inserted into the system by college students. So we're really looking at it from that perspective and trying to minimize to the fullest extent we can the impacts on local agencies because this data collection is so important. And James clarified on the second part. It used to be that it was going to be housed in Wazoo, and as it stands, and we weren't certain about that because there are a lot of private universities out there that we think might be in a better position to work on this data and provide for this data. So we had it amended so it's housed in a university, public or private. And what we expect is public and private universities to put in a bid together. So that should hopefully, keep us on the side of, not having law enforcement watch over the data for law enforcement. That's one thing we've heard over and over and over again over the last year or so is that, and you're seeing this in a lot of these bills is, law enforcement overseeing law enforcement just is a really tough gig. And we understand that particularly in this situation and believe we got a good answer for that. So as I always say, the data will set you free. All right. Talked about Brady. I'll get down to the audit bill 1089. That was passed out of the Senate Law and Justice, or is scheduled to be passed out of the Law and Justice Committee on the Senate side next week. Recall that's the process compliance audit bill that authorizes the state auditor to go back after an independent investigation and a charging decision has been had or not had. The state auditor goes back and does a process compliance check, not a substantive check, but checks to make certain that, and I'll just say it this way, that all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, and the process laid out in 1064 and the rules that were adopted pursuant to 1064 and 940 are complied with. And because of all the hiccups we've had over the last few years since that's been adopted, as reflected in the Attorney General's report, that's something that we are very much supportive of. There's one section in there that we think gives the Criminal Justice Training Commission a little bit too much authority to initiate investigations for the state auditor. We're gonna keep pushing that softly as the bill continues through the Senate, and we'll go from there. Anything on audit, James, Marco?
I just thought you did a good job of testifying in front of the Senate when it went in front of the Senate this week. And again, it passed unanimously out of the Law and Justice Committee and onto the floor of the Senate. So this is one of the bills that is moving very quickly, along with the impeachment
Yep.
bill.
Yep. And just to clarify, it moved out of the Senate Law and Justice Committee. So it's a House bill in the Senate. So it passed out of the House almost unanimously. And then we'll be on this after it passes out, assuming it'll pass out next week. Then we'll be on the Senate floor. Okay, I'm going to do two more bills, James, that you missed. We got about 11 minutes left, and then we can talk about the George Floyd Justice Act. Senate Bill 5055, that's the arbitration bill of Senator Wynn's. Remember that passed off the Senate floor 41-8 this past week, and now it's been scheduled in House Labor Workforce House Labor Committee next week on the 10th. We're supportive. I don't know that we'll testify in support. We may give Representative Sells some time on his committee hearing list. But that's a bill that's moving forward. And remember, this is the bill that requires everybody to use PERC arbitrators in a grievance arbitration process. And it started with 6 arbitrators geared towards this effort. It was amended to up to 9. Excuse me. And now I think the number is 15 or 16. So they're going to be in good stead to hear all of the grievance arbitrations that happen. And we think that that'll also be and work well for peace officers, because it'll show that, it isn't always decided, on the side of the peace officer. And I think somewhere I saw it usually runs about 50-50. I think 46.8% to the local agency was one number I saw recently. So we're supportive of that bill. And then the last bill I will mention is 5066, and this is the peace officer duty to intervene. It passed off of the Senate floor 28-21, which is pretty much party line. It's been scheduled for next week in the House Public Safety Committee. We were fine with that bill as it passed off the Senate floor. We'll do another double check. And we'll testify accordingly next week on the 12th when it's heard before Roger Goodman on the Public Safety Committee. So with that, I continue to be shocked at how fast we can get through everything. We got 9 minutes left, and the last thing we have on the agenda is before closing remarks and the good of the order is the George Floyd Justice Act. James, Marco, you guys want to talk about that?
You want to go first, Margo, or you want me to?
Go ahead and take a stab at it there,
All right.
James.
So everybody knows last session in Congress, they ran after the terrible incidences in the Midwest surrounding the death of George Floyd that we all condemned and we thought were bad. They ran a bill that did away with qualified immunity for police officers, banned chokeholds on the federal level, and banned any federal money going to any agency that still utilizes the chokehold, or LVNR below the level of deadly force in their use of force continuum. That bill died at the Senate last session, and with a lot of opposition, but there's a new makeup in the Senate. Marco pointed out to me yesterday, and I agree to an extent, that if when it goes over to the Senate this time, which by the way, it was run this week, it did not go through the committee process. They shipped it straight to the floor of the House of Representatives. It was voted out party lines, and it is sitting in the Senate to be dealt with this week. They need 10 votes or so to break the filibuster to get this through. That being said, there's a lot of talk in different management communities talking about, so if it doesn't make it through Congress, a lot of these are going to go into what they call a federal certification requirement. So agencies will have to adopt these policies in order to receive federal money. We already have a federal certification process, and it's essentially you'll apply with all state and federal laws dealing with use of force. You will have a duty to intervene policy and those kind of things. So either way, there's going to be some kind of action at the federal level. But again, George Floyd Justice Act brings up a lot of things that we're dealing with here on the state level. We're actually in a better place than if the George Floyd Justice Act were to pass. We would be in a lot worse place. So watching what goes on at the federal level, because the FOP is a national organization, plays in a big part in our local or our state strategy here in Washington State. The other thing, it changes the use of force standard to a necessary standard. Stop me if you've heard this. We might have heard this in 1310 when it was originally proposed. But again, it's got a long way to go inside the Senate, U.S. Senate. We are going to reach out to our brothers and sisters in other states and at the national FOP level and try to get a concerted effort to lobby the Senate to make sure that that bill does not look like it does today, or it does not pass. So, Marco, you got anything else to add?
No, I want to echo that, a lot of these things is if you see our strategy that we have talked about for many weeks on the, on this Zoom meeting, is to come together with, with our legislators and be at the table. And I think that speaks to what we've done on a local level to reach out to not only community members, but also to both sides of the aisle to try to come up with good policy. And that's what we're about, is trying to create good policy. And whether with the understanding that obviously changes will be made, but we're going to be at the table and try to work on and be solution oriented. We didn't see that in the House of Representatives on the, over in Washington, D.C. when this bill did pass. There were no committee hearings, no opportunities for amendments or discussions. And we're hoping that that's the case in the Senate, on a national level. So it does have a long way to go. We're still, we still have to be concerned about it, but I think that there's a path that we can make sure that, the qualified immunity and especially the necessary standard is dealt with.
Okay, I think we're about ready to go around the room. And before we do that, I just want to thank Michael. I think you do a hell of a job for us. You put in a lot of long hours, and this, I got to say, we probably are taking up a lot of your time this session. not by choice. You know what I mean? It's just subject matter, but I want to say thank you for all the hard work. So with that, Jeff, Leah, you got anything else to add?
No, we're good. Thank you so much, guys.
Charles, you got anything else to add?
Nothing on my end. Thank you, gentlemen.
Sister Triplet, you have anything you would like to add? Okay. Marco, you got any closing words?
I got one. And I know I'm not Marco. I just want to answer. So somebody had asked in the chat about Wazoo's been doing some data for the WSP for several years. My answer was that the data that they're doing for the State Patrol is very, very limited. So we think that there should be a more robust agency or university to take this on. And quite frankly, I think it kind of goes to, they're probably good on the criminal justice side for use of force and some other stuff, but not so good for all the other stuff. And so we just kind of viewed it as sort of out of their area or level of expertise. And they've been willing to say, okay, we're good with that. And that's why we've jettisoned it to this RFP process where they will hopefully be involved in a bid, but they won't be the holder of the data and the overseer of the data. And I'll just be honest about it. The fiscal note they put on this data collection for them to do it their way was astronomical. So that's why it's not at Wazoo.
Yeah, the original, the original bill had it at Wazoo, but it was astronomical. I was thinking it was like 12 million a year for the first 4 years.
Oh no.
Yeah, it got bigger because they wanted to, but the data collection set that we want is the more data points, the better it looks for us, because it gives you context and the whole picture. People can't cherry pick the data and use it against you.
Yep.
So, and yes, the RFP is written where it has to be a public-private partnership between universities. And I think the key there is universities, not law enforcement groups. So anyway, Kim, I see your camera on. You got anything you would like to add?
Oh, you're on mute. You're still on mute. I don't know if James can unmute you or not.
Nope, I cannot. All right. You're on mute, Kim. So going on to Marco.
All right. No, as always, I want to thank everybody for participating, listening in today. It goes to show how this organization truly is out there to work on behalf of all of law enforcement. And that's what's unique about us, is that we represent every facet of law enforcement within our organization, which has made us so successful and throughout this nation with more than 361,000 members. And so just think about that a little bit, how we have 361,000 members, dedicated members who really care about the profession, and we're going to work together to continue to try to make it as best as it can be, and also recognize some things that and be that solution-oriented organization. So I do appreciate, and Michael, you've been a rock star. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. And with that, thank you.
Hey, last thing I'll say, give me about 10 minutes. This will be up on our YouTube channel, which is WAFOP TV at Washington State Fraternal Order of Police. Just go to YouTube, search that. It'll also be archived here on Facebook. I want to point out we had quite a few of our members watching. I also want to recognize a couple board members that were watching on Facebook, our national trustee, Jack Symington, and my counterpart on the east side of the mountains, Bill Splon. Other than that, we'll see you guys next Saturday. We're trying to get a special guest, Steve Nelson. We're trying to bend his ear and give us 10 minutes of his time next Saturday to talk about the Left 2 and how things are going with Left 2. So pass the word. We're going to have our retirement guru on here. And again, see you guys next Saturday.
Hold on. I just got notice that House Bill 1310 is probably going to be the first bill that the House of Representatives takes up this morning. So for those of you who are TVW junkies, you can get on the website and watch that live.
Sounds good. See you guys.
Thanks, everybody.